Recording. All right, recording is live. So thank you for being here today. My name is Amber Peterson. I'm with Permian Peterson Associates. And oh my goodness, with everything that's going on right now, I think we all need a few health check-ins to see where we're at. And when my business partner Kathy and I were talking, she brought up the idea that we should really be sharing some of our knowledge with you folks on how we can all stay healthy through this time. And I jumped on that and said, great idea, let's do it. So here we are today. And so the point of my talks, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Central Time, for a little while, are that we're going to talk about health, some different things related to how we can all stay physically, mentally, emotionally healthy through this challenging time, while we are all sequestered and physically distanced from each other. So this week, the topic that I chose was post-traumatic growth and resilience. What is it and how can we achieve it? Even through this time, there are still things that we can do, and really to stay healthy, what's important now. So if you have a suggestion for one of the upcoming weeks of something that you'd like to hear, I'd be happy to dig in and talk about it, and we can have a discussion. So these aren't only information sessions, right? They're also discussions. So the first part of this will be information, and then we're going to have a little bit of discussion that won't be on the recording for you folks listening in later. But feel free to email me or shoot me a message, give me a call. I'm happy to talk with you and see where you're at and brainstorm with you on what you can do during this time. So with that, we are going to get started. So if you're on the discussion today, we're going to have we've already done our quick introductions. We're going to do some tidbits on post-traumatic growth and resilience, and then a discussion. So where your mindset's at, what you're doing for self-care right now, or what do you need for self-care is the other part of that question. And feel free, if you're watching this recording later, send me a message. Let me know. I'd love to talk with you about this. Okay, so post-traumatic growth, what is it? How do we get there? It may be a new term for you. When I first heard this, I was blown away by the research that people are doing on post-traumatic growth. I'd heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. This is kind of the flip side of PTSD. PTSD fits in there, but this is the other side of it. So what is post-traumatic growth? The definition from the University of North Carolina Post-Traumatic Research Group is positive growth as a result of a struggle with a major life crisis or traumatic event. So this is what I want to highlight is the positive growth aspect. Now you might be wondering, Amber, you mentioned resilience. Isn't that resilience as well? And where does resilience fit into this? So yes, resilience is a big part of this. And what resilience says is, how fast do we spring back from something? It's, for me personally, my big takeaway with resilience is how quickly am I coming back? You know, I'm hoping that I am coming back and having some growth as a part of things, but how quickly do I spring back? We'll talk a little bit more resilience as we go, but that's post-traumatic growth for now. So I want to show you some graphics on what does post-traumatic growth look like? What does it look like? So we have the definition, but what is it? So as we keep going here, I want to first say thank you to Professor Jim Olhoff from St. Mary's University of Minnesota. He put together these graphics, gave me permission to use them, and I love the way that he represents post-traumatic growth here. Made it very clear for me, and I hope it does the same for you. So from various groups that have done research around this, what Professor Olhoff put together here is we start out on this graph at our current normal level of functioning. That's where we are at in our day. What are we doing? How well are we interacting with people? How well are we taking care of ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, professionally, financially, lots of different realms here, but on average, how well are we taking care of ourselves? Normal level of functioning. Now, the next part is, boom, we have a trauma. Now, if we look at this in the light of COVID-19, you may be experiencing this right now and may be stuck in this part right now. You may have experienced this 2 weeks ago. You may have already experienced this, have moved on, and now you're going to hit it again. You know, this is a very fluid concept, right? Trauma. But when we talk about this, an example might be that my trauma is I'm a restaurant worker, and guess what? Last week I got laid off, and now I've lost my connections with my people because maybe I'm younger and I live by myself, so I'm not seeing other people right now because I'm practicing physical distancing is what I want to say. Uh, I'm not getting any income right now. And I might be struggling with all of this. Maybe I have family members who are sick, but that's my trauma, right? I was laid off. Now, what that does is typically, especially if it's a big enough trauma, it launches us down into a lower level of functioning. Now, what that means is that for some of us, and I'll speak to myself in traumas that I've been through in my past, I retreated into my hole. You know, I had trouble interacting with other people. I didn't want to be around people. I wasn't happy at the time, I'll tell you that. I wasn't experiencing happiness, right? And I was really struggling. Part of that was depression from critical incidents I was involved in a previous job. Now, this launches us down, right? And like I want to also draw attention to this lower bar down at the bottom, which is time. So we have level of functioning and we have time. So recognize that as we talk through this, time could be very short, it could be very long. So as we look at the next slide here, shock, disorientation, numbness. Now this is the low level of functioning part, right? This could, for one person, this might be a day. For another person, it might be a year. It might be a very long time for some people. And it really depends on how big was that trauma for me. Did I lose my job and that was huge for me? Or did I lose my job and I said, what am I going to do? And then I sprung back because I had an option, right? Did I lose a family member? Did someone die in my life from this illness? All right, I'm going to pause really quick because I see someone else jumped on. Welcome, Gina. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Fabulous. Okay, can you see my screen?
I can, thank you.
All right. So I'm recording this to pop on later, but I'm only recording the part where we're talking about post-traumatic growth and resilience. So the discussion will be later. Okay. Thank you for joining today. So post-traumatic growth, quick recap. It is positive growth as a result of a major life crisis or traumatic event. So really it's the positive growth that we experience after we've experienced something hard and traumatic in our lives. And what I'm showing now is something that I got from a professor that I have high regard for, Jim Olhoff from St. Mary's University of Minnesota, in his representation of post-traumatic growth. So we start out in our regular functioning, we hit a trauma in our lives, and it sends us down. So into what I would call lower functioning, meaning I am in a rut. I may be depressed. I'm not where I used to be is really the key there, right? And I may be experiencing shock, disorientation, and numbness from that. Now what happens after that, because we're all going to go through, after we hit a trauma, we're all going to go through that time where we're experiencing some shocks and some numbness or some different emotions, right? We're in our rut. Maybe a day, maybe a year. At some point, we're going to find a way to cope out of it. So there's various levels of this, and I'll say before we jump into those that someone might bounce between many of those different levels over time. They may go up, they may go down, and none of these are good or bad. They are just either dysfunctional or functional, is how I'll phrase those. So for someone coming out of this, they may go to what we call pathology. So this is where maybe they are chronically depressed after this trauma and they struggle for a year, they struggle for the rest of their lives, they struggle for a time. It may be a long time though that they are in this pathology state where their functioning doesn't go back up. They're stuck there in that shock, disorientation, numbness, if I'll put it that way. The next possibility is what in this field, what they call ugly coping. Now, ugly coping is because we all cope in various ways with how we experience trauma, with how we experience a really hard event, and it's either functional or it's dysfunctional. In this case, it's dysfunctional. So ugly coping could be that I've turned to alcohol. I've turned to drug use. I have completely isolated myself where maybe I don't leave my house. I don't talk to anybody. I am completely withdrawn from society. It depends person to person, right? But I'm not coping well with the situation in a functional way. And you'll see that it raises, this little bar here raises up and then comes back down. Because for a time, this works for us. It makes us feel better. We seem to function, we seem to come back up a little bit and, oh, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. But then eventually with this kind of dysfunctional coping, you're going to pop back down. And this could be, again, we could pop between these two. We could pop up and pop back down to ugly coping. If something reminds us of that event, that traumatic event, depends. The next possibility is partial recovery, that eventually we're going to reach stability. Stability in the sense that we've figured out some coping mechanisms. Maybe if I take the example that I started with, where I lost my job as a result of COVID-19 because I worked in a restaurant. Now I'm laid off for a while. I may have struggled here for a time, and now I've come back up where I've said, okay, there are things that I can do. I have a little bank account. I can call my friends, so I can still reach out to them. Like, it's okay, but I'm not where I used to be yet. I'm not there. And again, this could be a short amount of time. This could be for the rest of my life. Depends on how bad that trauma was and what it was. Yeah. Next one, recovery. Now, recovery in the sense that I am back to where I started. I have learned things and I've gone through things during this time, and I'm back at my quote unquote level of functioning. So I'm back interacting with people again. Maybe I'm back in my job. I can do things again. I'm feeling okay. I'm back there, and it's functional, right? We're there. Now, the next one is really where the key is for post-traumatic growth. It's where we rise above and we actually have that growth from where we used to be. So when I learned about this, I got to learn about some case studies that were done with Vietnam veterans, POWs in particular. When they talked with these POWs when they came back after the war about their experiences, because many of them were tortured, were put through very, very rough circumstances, very traumatic circumstances. And what they found was that a group of them actually experienced renewed appreciation for life, belief in new possibilities, enhanced personal strength, improved relationships, and spiritual change. And they said, what is going on here? And out of that, they said, this is post-traumatic growth. They came in at their level of functioning. Then this trauma hit them from the war. They dipped down. They struggled. They may have went all over the place in here, right? But then once they came out, they were rescued. They got back home. Even before that, for some of them, before they got home, they were feeling some of this. They felt this growth. I know more about myself. I have greater wisdom in my surroundings and my circumstances, and I have more appreciation for my life and the life of others. Very, very intriguing. So I want to point out quick here that it's shown here as like a nice linear kind of change, right? It goes up real nice. That's not life, right? This is going to go all over, and it's going to take twists and turns, and it might take time, and I might go back down, and for a time I might go into ugly coping, or I might be partially recovered. I might go into growth and come back down. It's messy. It's messy. And this is what we hope for. This is what we aim for, is that growth. So now, how do we get there? Okay, Amber, thank you for that. Oh, first, where does resilience fit into this? Resilience is this ability to get up here. It might even be the ability to get here to recovery, or even partial recovery, but it's how. Am I able to, boom, get back up here, get to growth, and how do I get there? So here's how you could boost your resilience, especially during this time when we're all struggling, right? No matter where you're at in this cycle, help boost your resilience and get you back up towards that upward spike of that growth. So how do we get there? First, really, we need to take a pause. The first is taking a pause and recognizing where we're at. This is meaning making at its finest. And I love this tool that I learned. It's from Human Systems Dynamics Institute, and it's the adaptive action cycle. And it's what, so what, now what. What this means is I stop and I make meaning of my circumstances, my what, and that's the facts. So we'll take the facts right now. We're shut down, right? Wisconsin is completely shut down, and Minnesota looks like it's going to follow. The other facts are that this illness is very contagious. We're finding that we can get it without even knowing it and pass it along without even knowing it. I might have no symptoms, some symptoms, or a lot where I'm put in the hospital, and there are people of all ages who are dying from this illness, right? Those are some of the whats. Those are the facts. Now the so what. The so what is the meaning making portion of this. So important. That is, what am I noticing? What am I surprised about? What am I curious about? What does this mean to me? Really, I want to live into this step and really feel it out. What does this mean to me? In my example of maybe I'm a restaurant worker and I just lost my job, my so what might be, well, I'm upset that I lost my job, and I'm hopeful that I will get a job again once we come back. I'm wondering what this means for me financially for the future, and I'm a little anxious about what's happening, and I'm worried about my family. That might be my so what right now. How am I feeling about all this? It's important to make that step, because if we don't make the meaning making step, we aren't able to connect ourselves as deeply to how we are doing in this situation and really feel out, where am I in this, instead of jumping right to action, because that's what we usually want to do. We want to jump right to action, to the now what. Stop and pause. What does this mean to me? So now what is, I may be considering, well, what can I do in the meantime? Can I get a job online? Do I have a cash fund that I can jump into? I might be looking at, what can I do around my house? How can I connect with people right now? My now what? So great step. Make meaning of your situation. We can do that at any time. The second part is what's called adaptive flexibility. What is that, Amber? Words, throw them on out. What it means is that it's being in two places at once, or feeling two things at once that collide with each other. So it might mean that, and these are some phrases that you could use for yourself to help practice some adaptive flexibility. It might mean, I'm noticing on one hand that I'm feeling really anxious about what's going on. And on the other hand, I'm hopeful that this is going to end soon. The situation is hard because I'm distanced from my family and I can't see them physically. And it's helpful because I am building really strong relationships with my husband and my daughter right now, while we are stuck here together. It's being in those two places at once. And what this is it's a mind shift. It's a mindset shift for all of us. Instead of being in a place of telling ourselves, this is the worst thing I've been through, it will never end, and I'm stuck here forever. I'm shifting my mindset to recognize how I'm feeling about those things, and then look at the flip side of the coin. So instead I might say, I recognize this is really hard, and it's the hardest thing I've had to go through in a long time. It feels like it might last forever. And I'm sad that I'm distanced from my family and my friends, and I'm worried about them. And I'm really thankful that we're practicing, say, physical distancing to keep each other healthy, and that there are measures being taken to try to keep us all healthy. And I recognize that this will end someday. Someday we'll get to be in the physical space together. So adaptive flexibility, this is such a key to resilience right here. Okay, next thing, call your team. Calling your team, so important. So here's one thing I want to say about connections. The researchers, the people with the brains and the time and the gumption to go and look at happiness and positive psychology, what they found is that our connections with each other are what drive happiness. Truly, at the end of the day, that's the number one thing. Martin Seligman, he's seen as the father of positive psychology and researching happiness, and he drives this point home, as well as, I'm going to jump to the third little point here on the PowerPoint, give support and return, that not only does our connection with people drive our happiness, but it's also what we give back to people that drives our happiness. And that's a huge point. So what I'll say with calling your team, not calling your team together physically, unfortunately right now, but how can we connect virtually? How can we jump in with each other? It's reaching out to your people, your loved ones, your friends, your family, and asking for what you need. Now that might be, hey, I need to see someone face to face right now. Can you jump on video with me in some way? It might be, I just need a phone call every day, or I need a text to see how you're doing. And then it's giving that support in return. So not only am I asking for what I need, I'm also letting other people know, hey, I need this, or I need this from you. And what do you need from me right now? What can I give you to feel better? That might be, I'm going to drop some food on my neighbor's doorstep because they're struggling right now. Or it might be, I'm just going to give my mom a call every day and see how she's doing. Give that support. So not only do we have FaceTime, if you have iPhones, we have Zoom, which is free. If you have 3 or more people, you get 40 minutes of free time, right? There's a lot of platforms we can pay for if we want. Skype is free. We have options. Let's take them. Connect with people. And the last one, self-care. So important, right? To make sure that not only are we physically moving, because that's been shown to help boost our immune systems, even if we're taking a walk every day, getting some fresh air, if we're moving our bodies, you throw on a song that makes you jam a little bit, whatever the case is, just keep moving your body. So important. Mental and emotional awareness and support, even just stopping and pausing, that first step, pausing and saying, how am I feeling right now? For some of us, this is harder than others. I personally, I'll say that I have a really hard time connecting with my feelings, and I have to ask myself, how am I feeling right now? And I know there are others that join me there. And so it's stopping to say, how am I truly feeling? Because how it's coming out might be that I'm snapping at my husband, or I'm getting really annoyed with the dog or something. And I have to stop and say, whoa, where's this coming from? And how can I support myself? And then how can I show myself some compassion? Because it's really easy to beat up on ourselves right now as we're stuck, as we're confined, as it feels like options are getting taken away from us. It's really easy to beat up on ourselves. So it's to stop and say, to give ourselves some grace and to say, what do I need to do for me right now? Do I just need to have a snack because my blood sugar is a little low? Do I need to step outside? Do I need some alone time? Do I need to connect with a loved one? Practicing those things. So with that, I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop the video, but actually I'm going to jump to the end really quick for the video and say, please contact me, Amber at permypeterson.com. You can always go to mine and Kathy's website, permypeterson.com, and see what we're doing, or jump in on another call with us. Kathy is doing a call on Thursday for small business owners, other consultants, other people in the gig economy. How are we surviving right now? Please, she's got some great content. Jump in on her call at 11 a.m. Central Time. The resource that I had was hsdinstitute.org. Check them out. They've got a lot of really cool stuff and tools on their site. But otherwise, get in touch with me. How you doing? What do you need? What can we do for you right now? Please reach out. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and I'll see you later. But those on the call, stay with me.